just to review what we're doing, we're approach, this is where you have to see where you're at with somebody. First of all, your height to their girth. Now, Frank, he's going to go lower on the table because we have muscles and fat and stuff. If this was us already, we would be that much more off the table. You know what I mean? Can you see already the difference versus working on a skeletal system? But by all means, come here and work with Frank. But just to review what we did yesterday, you really can see the gorgeous of the femur and how that femur should, see it rotates out. It has a certain momentum. Not only that, but with the femur head. Amber's got an x-ray for us to see, just to show the difference of what can happen with hip complications. But you can see, again, like architecture, the flying buttresses in Gothic work, right? Flying buttresses, Gothic?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All of a sudden, it's like when I quote stuff like that, it's like... So, but also what I'm really trying to teach you, and this is what I want Frank here, is just the beauty of the sacrum. We are not here to lift a knee. When we lift a knee, the body doesn't move. So to just look at lifting, so this is where everything I do has a two-hand approach. So not only I have that light glide here, which is going to be a little bit more difficult because this femur bone's about, a good 1/4 inch. But, so, see already here. Do you see just that simple movement? This is what I'm after. Is the vertebrae itself to start to twist, but see that sacrum and look at the counter with the coccyx.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Do you see it?
Yeah.
That little tail wag.
And is that actually going to the lumbar area when you're doing that, or does it
Well,
just the
if you
whole
look,
spine?
it'll go through the entire system. Even you should see a shift out into the wrists and to the hips. That counter, all that stuff we were just doing with everyone hula hooping. By the way, everyone hula hooped. But
It was awesome.
everybody hula hooped.
You have to put that in your curriculum next time.
But see here how I'm looking, see the foot counters, the chest counters, all of this should counter. But if you look at the ribs here, I'll show them from both sides. See how the ribs go tuck right in and they come underneath that torque into each vertebrae. Mm-hmm. So when I'm moving through here, right, see how it's like a little screwdriver going in there, right? So when I'm working on the rib cage, what I was trying to show you is, see how I'm spreading my vertebrae out just as much as I'm doing rib work, right? So the same thing here. So Frank doesn't do it as nicely as I'd like it to, but sternum's going to shift midline. So the coccyx and the vertebrae are here. The vertebrae are so thick, and they bend into the system. They go against your organs, right? So when the back, see when it moves and it twists like that, that's what you're after. So when I'm here in just this little bit, do you see that counter? There's a light twist throughout the spine, and that coccyx bone, see how it tilts over towards me in a sense, or towards the knee. Right? But that sacrum slide should happen. So I'm going to break it down just to show you what should be happening. And you saw it sort of towards the end with Stuart, but if I actually grab through the ischiums here, right, is see again that little slide, that sacrum should be happening. Does that make more sense? I don't know if it's here that. See the difference?
Oh, wow. I want that. I was really
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of movement in there.
So when I'm talking about working with the babies, look at how free that pelvis should be. That's what should happen with the babies.
Can you do that gyroscope, I guess, again?
So here, see if that's what your hip should be doing. Right? So when you're touching up through the pubic bone, especially when I have the sacrum here, just see how that all should be free.
We need
Right?
this on video yet.
This is what Nella should be doing. Do you see that? So when I'm here with the baby and coming underneath like that, that's what I'm doing, is I'm freeing up that independence from the sacrum, from the pelvis. Does that make sense? So if I'm like this, right, here even standing, right, see how my sacrums can stay straight and I can drop my pelvis around. See, It's like if I have a string here, my pubic bone can come up and go down. You see the difference? But then what I want to do is that sacrum now, like the hula hoop, to become independent, right? And see that. Does that make more sense? So the sacrum is doing this kind of a movement, but it's wagging, right? As the pelvis goes up and around. And with that, now the hips are countering whatever my pelvis is doing. So if I come here like that, when the hips are here, let's see if I can really get it on with Frank here. That's what I'm looking for. You see the complexities of that whole counter, just within the hip. Does that make sense? So that's where the gyroscopes come. So you have that circular motion through here, you have the circular motion through here, you have the circular, all these different circles coming at one another, if you would look at it, all within counterbalance. So no matter what I do, if I just go like this with the hip, see how that whole system just should counteract. But if my hip goes more like this, look at the difference of that counter. Is that starting to make more sense? Now, he still has a stick up his butt, so it's still not going to be as nice as I'd like. So see nicely now? See how Frank, the more I work on him, he responds to... No, it's true. It's really weird. He's plastic, but he's still getting a lesson. Even if I go back now and do this, do you see the difference? Look
Intelligent
at
skeleton there ever was.
So now what I was doing, more so again with Stuart yesterday, quickies, but I'm going to show you. I'll do a quickly span out, and then I'm going to go into do it detail. So see now when I come in, now to see the counter this way, how look at the pelvis like a fruit bowl, you know what I mean? More significance, I think, a little bit with women giving the birth and having the uterus thing, because we have different body parts in that. So therefore, the internal muscle structure is going to be different. We don't, have testes that are hanging down, affecting all of those kind of things. All of these things are again, a counter movement. So again, now, if the trochanter doesn't cross midline, again, do you see where there's a different conversation going on with this counterbalance? However, now I'm going to have to use a bit more girth with Frank. If I come in here and torque that hip, do you see that here? However, now if this is so hold the foot here, just keep them stiff. See the difference, how I'm going to pull that hip out. And that's where the concern is where these kids have that. So now you rotate that big toe towards my shoulder. Not when I start going. So now when I do it, see the difference? There's a counter. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. Knee to knee. Knee to see the pelvis. See the ischiums, how they start flaring out. Mm-hmm. Right? And then bringing it back. Coming back again. So where I'm here again, so leave that alone. Coming in. Do you see how I get a good tell of what someone's doing? This is going to be much harder on an aging adult. But that's where when I come in and go, oh, you can get out of the car really nice. Trochanter down, knee flags, But if I go like this, or again, this wants to stay here, and someone's like going, my knee hurts, that's where the conversation starts to happen. So just because someone's knee hurt, that's why I wouldn't necessarily work on the knee. I have to see what stresses are going through that knee. Even if the person is like where I have with Denise, where she's bone on bone, and I have to work with that, it's still, the stress is really going to come from wherever. It's just like if I go try and break a twig. If I sit there and try and break that femur, where is the stresses coming from? So again, where is the stress going through? That bone here has to act like it's solid.
Well, that's a good question. And how would you do it for like where my mother has had complete knee replacement?
Well, again, that's what I was talking about. There's no movement through that. It's titanium.
Right.
So that's where, again, I really have to make sure these feet move well and the chest cavity moves well. So for the lack of movement that's going to go through the knee. Because those are artificial parts. It'd be like me cutting this off and now putting wood. And that's why Frank's not going to work the same way too, because he is plastic versus a human bone. A human bone is still, because it's porous, if I had this here, that skeletal system would be completely different to my touch, but also because even though that system's dead, it was still a living organism. So I really believe that it came here, underneath here. And then this is the next step that I did with Stuart. Again, we don't have a bunch of babies to play with. Stuart was mentioning that it's pretty neat, I think, and I, same thing too, I didn't get it in my per se training where strangers were worked on, much less little munchkins, and I'm glad, I hope you all appreciate that you really just don't realize what a delight it is for a parent to come and put their kid on the table, or someone to come in front of a bunch of people, but just to observe the lesson itself without thinking, where you're emotionally invested in that person, and you get to see a lesson instead of hearing what you could do for, you know, all of that. So, and we'll be, like I said, we'll be talking about this more as we all progress. I might bring in the omnis and stuff that you all can actually try and give them a lesson to and stuff, but it's easier said than done with those guys, because it's like 12 people here. We're like giant playgrounds to them. Just like when Enrique took Arlie and threw him around his shoulders and stuff like that. You know, there's no difference than a slide or Enrique as far as Arlie's concerned. It was like, woohoo, you know, and she would just go from person to person to see who she can climb on, you know, but that's great. I'm going to show it more in detail than the human, but I want you, again, just to appreciate more the counterbalance is. Where I'm coming here. Now, again, I probably come down here through the femur, but again, just to control that person doesn't go into a lift. You've got 5 fingers here to feel all these muscles, pulses, itises being any kind of itis, cellulitis, an infection that's in the body radiates a heat. That's what itis means, is heat. So you're going to come in, and first of all, if the foot presents like this, like it would with me, I'm built like this. There's no way around it. So you're going to feel the stresses. I really didn't even realize it until I took a workshop with Cynthia Allen where she was sliding the foot out, and everyone was like this, and there I am sliding my foot out going, wow, I'm really messed up. So, but again, 5 fingers, that you're going to be around a thigh. You'll feel, if you want to get a little bit closer, you'll be able to feel any kind of tightness within the groin, within the thigh, within the hamstrings. If you want to go this way, what I don't like about this way is because, again, it can get away. It's a light support or a guide, just like you're dancing. You know, you're sitting there, you're dancing with someone, but you're coming underneath now the metatarsals through the feet. The metatarsals are all these like little small suckers. Don't ask me to even think about what they were named are. I think I'm up to the helix, that's about it. And I'm probably wrong. But if you look at the heel, right, there's a scoop here. So everyone, if you look at your own foot, your foot looks like this, right? So your foot looks more like that. But the heel bone is quite narrow, right? You want to be around this person's of a certain foot. But what I'm saying this, because again, you might have it where the side of the foot is more overgrown here. It depends on the balance.
Could you show us that way?
So see, the heel would be more like this, right? So you don't realize what's going on here. So when you're just picking up, I don't want you to come in and scoop. I want you to feel that first, that seesaw that I've been talking about. I want you to feel where, so see with Frank here, I get more stresses here. If I go here, see now the heel drops. Do you see that? So here, sorry guys.
When you say working on a heel drop, is that a big part of what you're doing there?
Well, all of these moves are valid depending what you want, but I'm looking to scoop up the leg. So when I go for a scoop, I don't want that heel drop to happen because see, now the thigh goes down. I want to go to a point where it just starts to initiate. I want you really to get familiar with what that feels like throughout the body. It's that touch with initiation, not, oh, I've done this. This is why I don't like necessarily people starting to practice with what I'm doing before they start seeing it, because I want, you know, because they're looking for, everyone's thinking of their eyes now and the action. Oh, she wanted a knee up here. I want you to start really feeling, that initiation, but that counter. So see if I go too far, see Frank responds quite nicely. Just see how that heel drops. Now, if that was a case here, then I can go into above the condyles of the patella and work below the foot if I wanted to go. This is going down a set of stairs. It's a valid move, but what I want you to get used to is feeling that seesaw. The foot will feel too weak coming out here. And again, depending on person's arch, I'm very flat-footed, high arch, I have female, but if you just go like this too, like on me, the knee will collapse, right? And for others, the knee might not respond at all. So it's just a light bringing in that action. But if we go back now to the first one, the first movement, you see the difference of how. But what I'm looking for now is just, again, for you to start to feel that separation. See, look, see how the pelvis comes out and the femur goes long. Do you see how that counter through there should happen? Has just as much as the counter if it rotates out. So if I come here with both legs, and again, so see with crawling, this is patterning. Do you see the difference? That's not going to get a kid anywhere. There's no power there. There's no locomotion. But if you see the difference, he's not going to do it nice, but still.
When you're doing that, are you still waiting for that initiation of the body to...
Right. But this is, I think, a really nice way for you to feel just that. So if all you do is do this for like a good half hour, I would be tickled. Do you know what I mean? But at some point, again, I'm standing up here, then this is where a standing table is nice because I have more of that freedom, especially on that big person, to move more with them. Versus if I'm sitting down, if I was here, trying to get it up.
Yeah.
You know? So it is nice to have the, where you're, see how I can go right here. But just to show you too quickly to take this out, and then I'm going to be done with Frank. Sorry. See again the difference? For me to do something like that, the pelvis just locks up. It's not as responsive. The bolsters, the balls especially in this kind of situation really are nice.
Yeah.
Now, what?
No, I'm just looking at all this pelvis. So in Body Mind Center, they're adamant that it's not a pelvic bowl, but that it's two halves because this moves with this side and this moves with that side. And it's sort of, you're sort of saying the same thing. She just really gets into details, but there's something about the visualization that if we think of the two halves, that all that count, because there's counter happening between the two halves, right? Like they're not moving as one bowl.
Where I'm saying the bowl is just the girth of it. So if I'm moving a certain way, especially like if I'm working, let's say if someone's postpartum and after that, and I want to bring the uterus back in, let's say, is I'm not looking to jiggle the belly like Arlie was trying to do, but I'm looking to bring that into the system. Mm-hmm. So when you're working into the psoas and all of that, into the back of the muscles, right, then there are, I think, that where that visualization is important, where you look at the bowl. Or especially, too, this is where I climb Frank like this, sorry. But if I'm working, like, say, with the baby, and I'm coming in here, right? Do you see how, like, to me, these are just precious goods, and I'm holding that bowl of water. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking to move, but that being said, I look at it as moving the bowl around, not that stuff is per se in it. But again, that's like glass half full, half empty, which way you're going to look at it, right? But when I come in here, and so again, this would be the baby here. Sorry, I don't have a pediatric. This is where I can get into the femoral heads and really start working on that detailed work. When I say when I'm coming in through the pubic bone, do you know what I mean? I'm not making like this. But I'm feeling that slides. Do you see how those ischiums come around and into my hands, around here? But also, too, and again, I'm not grabbing Frank. I might a little bit because he's plastic, but see, I can come here like that. I can move me. You'll see me do that with the baby, or that's where I'm coming down in such a position here with the baby because I want the stability to be there where the pelvis is able to move around me versus me being, you know, again, like this. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do agree that there are two sides of it, but those two sides are still interacting. That's where I don't like, it's more what you've done, where, is it the Bowbound or the DMC, where they look at where they look at the bodies being in four planes, or they break it, you know, they slice it down and slice it here.
I don't think that's.
Well, you,
It's reflex.
love it?
Uh-huh, yeah.
But I'm just saying, there's a lot of people too that they tend to split a skeletal system in that. And so if I was only saying to do, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. So even here where I'm torquing in the femur, this guy was gonna wanna come.
Yeah, I think the only reason why could be interesting is to understand how they move in relationship to each other as opposed to one system.
Right.
That's
But it
all.
looks like, from
Like
Frank,
the
that there's
counterbalance.
less movement there than there is in the tailbone and the sacrum.
Right, but I
There's
didn't, I
less
didn't,
movement here
Right.
than there is here,
right, well, that's the thing is with where he's got a
but there is
or a rod
some
here.
movement.
So that's where I would be here with the sacrum and to start working
Right.
here with the individual movement as well as outside the pelvis. So,
And when you
I'll
do
steal,
the
sorry.
pubis bone does rotate.
And what Yetta was saying was exactly the way I felt, like it was glued together back there.
Right,
There was no
right.
separation.
right, so Madison's quite more forgiving. But you see how, so when I'm scooping and coming in, right? So if I wanted to do more of a bowl kind of work, but yet I agree that, let's say, and I did this with almost all the kids where they're pushing off on me or somehow, and separating the two pelvises, but still that action should be within
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah. The reason why they're talking about it is to understand that you can move, you can use your pelvis as well. You know, it's not just a hip movement, it's a pelvic.
Oh, whoa.
That your pelvis
Yeah.
moves with your leg.
Right.
That's sort of the reason behind that.
Oh, no, I know, I think this is.
You're saying the same thing. I'm just putting-
If the heart of the system, if this isn't moving, I'm telling you, you've got issues. And I totally, but I think to understand the pelvis and the pelvic movement versus everything else, in regards to that versus again, that wrist, you're gonna start seeing those same kind of movements. Do you know what I mean? But just from a different aspect. That elbow, me going into the elbow, is going to start showing those kind of aspects. So now if I wanted to influence that elbow and chest, or if I come into here kind of thing, depending on where I'm going with it. But I even almost hate talking about the pelvis versus being able to show you, and this is where the kids too are starting to lift, you know, where they start feeling the power and again, the different ways, not only the hip function, but again, now in this move, see what, this is what I'm trying to show you, the hips are moving away from the pelvis. We think of standing and everything as the hips going into the pelvis, or the femur is going into the, versus that going away. So when I'm going to do a cartwheel, and I'm upside down, just see how that femur is coming away from the pelvis. But the same thing too, when I go to walk, that femur should go away from like a pendulum versus muscles pulling up to do that. You can really see it more so here. Just see how that's, to me, more what I think of walking, is my femur actually hangs from my pelvis as I go to walk. So gravity just, and I go through it, right? I'm not thinking of, see how that's more muscular based walking. Right? Versus, see, the way I, sorry, move the Skype. So the way I'm going here, so see, more of a pendulum versus where it's a muscle base. See how my movement stops?
It's very interesting. I've just done a workshop where he was talking about the use of the skeleton in walking. In fact, it wasn't a falling model where you sort of transfer from the back foot through the fourth toe and then through to the big toe to push off. So there was never a fall, but always constantly using your skeleton to transfer the weight.
So now go here and feel a pendulum.
Yeah. Yeah. which is how I understood it. But it seemed to me that what he was saying was actually making sense in that you never want it to be a fall, but
Right.
always a smooth transfer of weight, so that you're using the whole of the length of the foot to transfer the weight and then to proceed.
Right,
So it's
but
never a
when,
drop.
but when you
drop.
use the whole length of the foot, that's where you're getting, again, that natural tendency of gravity and where you are in space, just like I was doing with babies when I go to present them to the table. There's a natural phenomenon, so even though you're using the muscles here of the foot to do that, but at that point, you see how my foot is in relationship to gravity? If you want to just scrape it down just a little bit. So, and so with the swing, and again, those are your button toys coming into action, coming into play. So when I go to present a baby, you see how I naturally should know where my pendulum is going. So just because you do that, but see, it's still a placement, just like when I'm placing the baby on the table. I mean, see that same relationship? So same thing here, and I can do it fast, right? But there's a placement, or that rolling onto the foot, that should happen. But again, not to talk about so much the foot function, but the femur is just, again, going away from that pelvis in a natural glide versus it being, and that's where, like, where we were talking about that exoskeleton thing to look for walking. It's much more like this. Do you see the difference? There's a machine, which again, it's great. If it gives me ability to walk, I'll take it. But it goes on the outside of the leg. But see, even this, I counter, right? I can't counter with that because it's a machine and it's sort of like, so sorry. And then it comes here. So that's what I'm seeing is this really stable versus, again, that counter. So if I go to walk, so I can't do this without countering. At this point, my pelvis wants to tilt to take up that difference versus it being, see here, to do that, how much my hip has to counter. I can't go perpendicular and do that. So you're teaching the system how to respond in a way that's not walking. But if that's what it takes to walk, I'll go for walking. But if someone too has the AFOs, right? I get it that they see the walk, but at some point when I have to keep down my foot at a 90-degree angle, see what I have to do with my chest now? That blade of counter to get out. And now I have to come up over my foot here. Now even that is hard to do because now this one's on a 90-degree angle, right? So I'm here putting my whole foot down, but again, look where I'm at to now bring.
I woke up
there's-
thinking about AFOs because there's different kinds of AFOs, like the articulated ones
Right,
versus the fixed ones.
Yeah.
So is that when you're demonstrating that, are you thinking about
Fixed.
fixed AFO
Yeah.
then? Okay.
But can you see it now? Where
Yeah.
someone's walking like this, but I'm just slowing it down. So again, see where my counter has to go. So it's like I have two different hula hoops going. Which one wins? No. Does this help seeing movement more
Yeah.
and thinking about structure and movement? Not to be critical. So,
Question, and this is just, maybe you don't even want to talk about it, but with Parkinson's.
right?
So their spine seems to be so very stiff. No movement there at all, which there's very little movement throughout the body, but just kind of curiously curious.
Well, first of all, I think differently about Parkinson's. I believe with Parkinson's that what it is you're losing your milestones of left-right. So the tremoring comes from, instead of me saying, hi, nice to meet you with my right hand, the brain's going right, left, right, left, right, left, right. It's trying to, and you're seeing this hand, so you're trying to facilitate. So it's losing that dimension of right leg. Also with Parkinson's, because they're doing that, now how do you take a step? Right, left, which foot goes first? You know what I mean? That's why I think they're finding such success with the pole walking. So I have a video on that because the pole walking extends now my counterbalance but keeps me stable versus if I just had a cane. So if I had a cane, see the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Versus if I'm pole walking. So I really like pole walking in general, whether the person's got Parkinson's or not. But they're seeing the research that, oh, if you exercise more, it lessens the degree of the Parkinson's. But because the left, right, when you do that, look what your spine does. Can you feel it? How stiff that spine gets. Because what you're doing now, the contractions along the spine are more intense. So it tightens the spine because so it's like having those shaking machines, you know what I mean? And that's what's happening. But since it's the left, right, that's where you're getting the stiff spine because the system can't handle the momentum. So I think if you integrate or do things like what we were doing with Malachi yesterday, you know, where I was having him and I made sure they touched hands, you know, that's important. Because to him it's like, I'm playing. I get to be with this person. How cool is that? And you're giving the eye contact. There's so much going on in that lesson, emotionally as well as movement, you know? So, but it's the same thing with the Parkinson's and things like that, is that if you're working, you know what I mean, and feeling that, because that's the one thing that people say to me, and I've had a guy, doctor, oh my gosh, and he looks at me and goes, I have a dumb brain. Because that's what it does to the system, because you go to sit down, and it's like, what cheek do you put on the toilet? You know what I mean? Wow. That's just so much. So, but I haven't heard anything out there that it's interrupting with the left-right organization. But that's my theories on Parkinson's.
The only thing I remember hearing was it's the initiation of movement that's interrupted.
Right.
So it's the initiation of the start, but it's also the initiation of the end.
Right.
So that's why it's like they're here, they can walk, but then they can't stop.
Right.
That's the only thing I remember from back then.
But I think that makes sense if I go to touch you and my brain's throwing out the signals of which hand do I touch her with, and that's where you start, and it gets worse and worse as that milestone deteriorates.
Thank you, that's
Okay.
helpful.